This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring, ring, ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
I was debating saving this message for the morning time so I could do a whole big good morning Vietnam message to you, but number one, I'm not a morning person, and number two, well, I'm not a morning person. But yeah, so watch Good Morning Vietnam this afternoon on your say so. Well, because you said you were going to watch it as well, or had watched it, I can't remember what. It's funny, like after waxing lyrical about Robin Williams in The Fisher King, I remember I saw one clip for this movie ages ago, and it was him at the DJ booth, and just something about it put me off watching it. Which is funny, because I'm a really big Robin Williams fan, but it just felt like something I had to be so much in the mood for to get on board with or something. I don't know what it was. And just looking at this here, probably mid-80s to late 90s, probably the era of Robin Williams. Even if you go between the Oscar nominations, he was nominated for Dead Poet Society, then Good Morning Vietnam, then The Fisher King, and then he finally won Good Will Hunting. I think he got 4 nominations. I could be wrong about that. Maybe I'm thinking he got 3 nominations. And then the 4th one was the one he actually won. Yeah, I can't say I'm a big fan of Good Morning Vietnam. It's a strange one, because obviously it's directed by Barry Levinson, who I really like a lot of his films. Diner, which you showed me before, which is very good. Rain Man, and even Sleepers, I'm a big fan of, which apparently got pretty poor ratings, but that movie works so well for me. I feel like this will come down to how much you're vibing with Robin Williams and his shtick in this. And I really do like the Robin Williams shtick, and I really like his ad-libbing, and I really like his switching in and out of a million different personas and characters like a submachine Uzi. But after watching this movie, it did occur to me, I don't know if I've ever seen a more adult stand-up performance, maybe, of Robin Williams. I've seen him contained in movies like Mrs. Doubtfire and Aladdin and movies like that, Jumanji. Don't know if I've ever been exposed to this type of stand-up by Robin Williams before, and on the surface it's very much the same. He's doing Wizard of Oz 1 minute, and he's doing an impression of a Irishman the next, but I don't know. For the most part, I didn't find this funny at all. And I don't normally find Robin Williams laugh out loud funny anyway, but I often find him very amusing. And it's a difficult position to be in, to be this voice, but some of these jokes rub me the wrong way, and I'm not PC by any means. And I think what it came down to was that the jokes weren't funny. Because I'll laugh at anything, but because some of these jokes were very juvenile, like someone would be sitting next to in English class in Tulla, who would make the most juvenile, low-grade, unfunny joke about a Vietnamese person or anyone. And it's just so groan-inducing that it's just, you need to be funny if you're going to be making jokes about other races or anything like that. You need to, obviously comedy is subjective anyway. Oh, here's the police coming to take me away. But yeah, that's one thing I had a problem with. And maybe the thing that didn't help with that is he's making the jokes while they're there. And a lot of this movie, in fact, all this movie seems to be almost minus the perspective of anyone else, which is absolutely fine, but didn't really get me on side when any of these characters, when these characters are meant to be doing charming things or endearing things, or at least things to get you on side. Didn't really work for me. Obviously, there's a scene where Robin Williams is bringing women to his table and he just flashes cash and brings them over, and then he gets them over. And I don't know, are we meant to like that scene? Because I found it not likable. And it's an odd thing for me to be saying for something that is predominantly a comedy. But I felt like a lot of this is dated as well. So I don't know why I was judging some of that under that microscope, because normally that stuff doesn't bother me. And if it's a comedy, I just let it slide because it's a dumb comedy. But I felt like, and maybe this is Barry Levinson's skill directing, but I felt like the film was trying to be more than it was on some level. So it rubbed me the wrong way, the moments that were maybe meant to get us there. I don't know. I'm a bit confused. What I will say is, and the thing is, Robin Williams does give a good performance anyway. Like, he does very well. He hits all the Robin Williams beats that I like. He can get emotional. He can get zany. But it just didn't really get me on side in this. I thought his performance was good, but I never really got on board with his performance. Now, it did have all the things that I like. Uptight army sergeant played by J.T. Walsh. Check. Someone's performance who I thought was really good, and it actually stand out for me, is Bruno Kirby, the Lieutenant Stephen Hawke. I thought he was very good because he wants to be funny and he's not funny, and he's jealous of Robin Williams. And when we had Robin Williams up against these authority figures and working, you know, in opposition to them, not wanting to be censored, not wanting to play the songs that want to be played. I like that archetype. I like being against authority. And I thought Robin Williams played that very well. It's something about his smiles, aren't they? The way he smiles. His smiles can mean a lot of things. His smiles can mean, I'm sorry for you. His smiles can mean, I'm embarrassed for you. His smiles can mean, go fuck yourself. Robin Williams' smile is a very underrated part of his repertoire. But yeah, the scenes where I laughed the most in this movie was involving Bruno Kirby and his interactions with Robin Williams. I thought that was very good. And Barry Levinson's directing is very good in this as well. The scenes in the DJ booth are very much almost done like a documentary at times, with the camera up close and moving around. It's almost like a music documentary. I think he shoots and integrates the city and the surroundings very well. He does it so well that the montages are fantastic with the music, and you're seeing the different bases, and you're seeing the different Vietnamese faces and the soldiers and all them interacting with the music and the voice of Robin Williams' character and the radio show. I really like that. And it does make you wonder, did he just go out and shoot on the fly? Well, maybe not, but because it's just shot so beautifully, and that gives the movie a little bit more prestige and a little bit more heart, and I don't want to say seriousness, but it hints at other things that, like I said, jars quite a lot at the comedy. There is a few things that I like quite a lot in this movie. The scene where they leave the club before it explodes, and we're listening to Robin Williams do his typical ad-libbing where he's talking, oh, I want to get her a banana. Oh, no, you're right, sport. Oh, I want to get her a... And then you're expecting a Robin Williams ad-lib to continue, and then the place where he was blows up. And that scene is quite shocking. And you see the wreckage, and you see the absolute devastation of a bomb going off, and that's shot really seriously and really shockingly, actually. But again, found that quite jarring in what is essentially a Robin Williams vehicle and the Robin Williams show. But did like the scene very much, and his ad-libbing really made that shocking. And the other scene I really liked was where he's thinking of quitting the radio show, and then I think it's Forrest Whitaker's character who drives him out and meets the troops, and he starts doing basically a stand-up routine or a live version of his show. And you see the faces and the interactions. And here's the thing, even though I didn't find the jokes particularly funny in that scene as well, and I guess you could argue that potentially the same type of wave as some of the jokes about the Vietnamese that I found a bit cringe. The scene I'm talking about now could have been accused of that as well, but because there's just some other things going on in it, and how the interactions with the troops are shot back and forth, and you see the laughter and you see how everything's going, it just makes it feel a bit different. But I thought that was a very good scene as well. The scene when he's teaching class and he's doing his ad-libbing, and we see the reactions of the locals. I thought that scene worked as well. I think the directing and the reaction shots of the people around did a lot to sustain the film and to sustain Robin Williams' shtick if you didn't find it particularly funny. As far as the plot goes, I couldn't really care when his love story was so cringe. But I mean, maybe this is like an Adam Sandler movie of his time as well. But I guess it's got a lot more prestige than that and Oscar nominations. So maybe you're expecting something more, and it's hard to get your head around what exactly this is meant to be because it's got such a good director attached to it as well, who knows people so well. So it is very confusing. But I couldn't give a damn about the romance. I thought that was bad. I thought that actress was really bad. The brother turning out to be a traitor for the rebels, honestly, dead air, dead time, and all this stuff. But I guess if I'm treating it just like an Adam Sandler comedy or a Ben Stiller comedy, then I can't really get too mad about scenes like that. So yeah, I'm not overly impressed by it. It was fine. I did want it to end. I don't really regret watching it. Good to see another Robin Williams performance that I haven't seen. I think he's good in it. He does all the things that I would expect and like in a Robin Williams movie. I just didn't like the character and didn't like some of the material, but that's fine. And yeah, I think the directing gives you a lot more to look at and a lot more to grip at than would normally be there otherwise.
Yeah, I felt more or less the same as you. Kind of quite a dated film in many regards. And the only other time I've seen it was as a teenager. You kind of referenced that some of the jokes, the type of things you might be saying back in secondary school. I think, yeah, I last watched it when I was that age. I don't think there was any friction there in terms of like racism, misogyny, anything like that. But watching it now, it is it very quickly. There's very quickly a mismatch between the kind, compassionate person that you know Robin Williams to be in real life to the script, which is lightly racist and misogynistic. Not in a way that's like, this film shouldn't be watched, it's like evil. It's just like, yeah, we've progressed beyond this as a society. And I think, as you mentioned a few times, Williams is a good actor. Levinson is a great director. Well, Williams is a great actor, actually, although I don't think he's a great actor by the time this movie's made. But the script is just not, it's not up to par. It's not funny, and it's okay. It's a fine script, but it's nothing incredible. I think you mentioned that scene where he wants to quit. He wants to throw in the towel. He's been fired, and then all of the troops have written in pleading for him to come back, and finally the higher ups have agreed, and so Forrest Whitaker's essentially just going out to say like, all right, you got the job back, and he's like, no, I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. I can't handle this combative nature between me and my superiors. And so Whitaker's like, all right, I'll drive you off to the, whatever, like, place where you're going to be coming to your new post. And they stop by the trucks of all of the troops. And as you said, a lot of this film feels like it's non-actors, just people that and it's like, here's a script, kind of like Curb Your Enthusiasm. Here, here's some material, but also you're Robin Williams, like, just do your thing. And so he starts kind of just bantering with them, and before you know it, he's in full-blown superstar mode, and he sees the look on their face, he sees what he's done to their morale, he sees just the impact he's had on them, and that convinces him to stay. That scene, as you said, is powerful beyond whether or not you find the comedy funny. And I think there's two things in this movie One is that we, the audience, are supposed to find it funny. We're supposed to find the jokes funny. We're supposed to find, all of his shtick funny. And two is we're supposed to care or be invested in the fact that other people find it funny. That the military, whether it's his close peers within his office, whether it's his English class that he teaches, or whether it's the thousands of troops that are stationed in Vietnam. The second part of that equation works. We can accept that, kind of like if you watch a movie about a musician, and you're like, you don't need to personally love the music to get and understand that this music is incredibly powerful to a great many people, and that can be a plot point, right? So the jokes are just not funny in this. We've seen Robin Williams be hilarious. I think he would probably have done better with no script, almost, or just writing his own material. So that side of things doesn't work, especially when you consider that Robin Williams just going off, ad-libbing, doing millions of non sequiturs. We've seen that from him better many, many times. Many, many times. In fact, for years, that felt like the only thing that he did. Then he, added more pathos to it over time. So watching not one of the best examples of it now is this isn't really, there's something clearly missing here. And that's a shame. And it's kind of it calls to question whether or not this is a comedy or a drama. Because if you say it's a comedy, then it's well, then the jokes have to work on you, the audience. But if you say it's a drama about a comedian, then that's not necessary. And the film goes back and forth. And obviously Levinson is a great director. And when it switches into more drama territory where you as an audience member is not supposed to be laughing at either very thin or juvenile or sometimes uncomfortable material, then you're enjoying the film more. Like the change, is it Change is Gonna, no, it's All the Time in the World, I think, montage. That was quite effective, and I actually thought the Tuon subplot, even though Tuon's a horrifically bad actor, I thought that Tuon subplot is actually pretty good. The fact that I did clock it when he took him out of the bar before it exploded that he was going to be Viet Cong. But I just think the idea of you go there, you're kind of a bit irreverent. You're clearly not the most political person in the world, or if anything, you're anti-US government. You start just having fun, drinking beers, making friends, having some bands, listening to some music. You make friends with the guy. And this guy turns out to be Viet Cong, and sort of puts in your face the idea that maybe the US troops there, stationed there, are the bad guys. And for, mid-80s, when did this film come out? Was it 88, 85, something like that? For mid-80s, that's it's interesting to be able to make that statement. Another little note in terms of history and politics and stuff is this film, I believe it's set in 65. I can't remember now. It says at the beginning of the film when it's set. I think it's 65. And it came out in 88 or something. I could have my dates off slightly, but my point is that that's a small enough gap that people in 1988 would have had a great familiarity with the situation in 1965, right? In the same way that you and I would fully understand the year 2001, September 11th, all that. We would know, we'd have a lot of context about the situation. We might not be politics junkies or history buffs or whatever, but it's recent enough that you don't really need to fill us in much, provide much context. And this film clearly doesn't feel like it needs to give you any context. It's just bam, you know what the situation is. And I'm watching the film thinking this is about the Vietnam War, just like Apocalypse Now or Platoon. And might I say, it's amazing how quickly that war generated films. Like Apocalypse Now must have been shot basically during the war. Like or I don't know how close to it, but all these films, Deer Hunter, like they're made so close to that war. But anyway, that's by the by. This film, they start mentioning quite early on that there is no Vietnam War. It's a police action. Kind of feels like Russia's special military operation into Ukraine. It's almost a semantics thing, but there's a massive debate about whether or not they should go to war in Vietnam, because they're not in war. They just have a military presence there assisting the Vietnamese military police. And when he wants to report on the bar being bombed, his superiors don't want him to, because doing so has a lot of implications in terms of whether or not that the country of the US would potentially go to war. So it's very precarious, and it's very, very, very specific, the time that it's set in, and what decisions are being made and what is being considered from a US point of view. And all of that is kind of, certainly it's new to me. I can maybe get some context from the film itself, but I don't have a context of that going in. I don't know how the war started and what were the considerations, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of interesting watching a film that's, yes, it's a period piece, it is set in the past, but it's such a recent past for when it's made that it's kind of like a contemporary story almost. I suppose, like, if we made a film about the 2008 financial crisis now, we would barely call it a period piece. Like, it would just be making a film about what's going on now, but yeah, we're quite late to the party almost. Anyway, that was just a stray observation that came to mind. I agree. Bruno Kirby, JT Walsh, always, like, both actors that are just like always a pleasure to see. I liked the guy that outranks the two of them as well. I wasn't familiar with that actor, but it's a good cast across the board. The guy that's DJing directly before Williams, I've seen here and there, and I can't quite put my finger on where I've seen him, but I like him as well. I think he's a good presence. I mean, it's classic Levinson to sort of know how to use actors. Like, I guess to cast the film well, he might have a very small part. I'm pretty sure Kirby's in Tin Men and perhaps even Diner as well. Like, he just go, this little bit here, stick this guy in, he's gonna kill it, he's gonna smash it, he's the perfect man for the job. To Williams, because I did mention earlier, I don't think he's quite the great actor yet. I remember watching him growing up on Mork and Mindy. Obviously, it was reruns. It was a 70s show, I believe. And I guess that made him a big star. I don't know how big that show was, but certainly feel like it was kind of the thing that really gave him a big platform. And I think he was also quite a popular stand-up comedian. Could be getting that wrong. But I was trying to sort of do the math on like what had come out at this point. I guess Dead Poets had probably come out and had maybe like catapulted him to like the big leagues. But obviously this is pre his 90s stuff. Mrs. Doubtfire, Aladdin, all that. I was very disappointed by the fact that he wasn't the finished article. Because a lot of the time you'll go back and you'll see, speaking of Levinson, let's say Tom Cruise in Rain Man or something, you know, it's like there's decades more of his career to come, and but he's already like, you're like, yes, yeah, this guy's, you know, doing everything he needs to be doing for this movie. And maybe it's the script, maybe it's the all of the dialogue he has to get through, but he wasn't, and he certainly wasn't bad, and I liked him in the movie. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm going too extreme in the other direction, but he did disappoint me a bit. And we've just watched The Fisher King. In fact, I think that's probably played a part in my choosing to watch Good Morning Vietnam. Just like, let's get through some more Williams. And The Fisher King, he's just like absolutely perfect in. This one, yeah, I suppose, as you said, it's an unlikable character. Within like 5 minutes of introduction, we see him like doing this bit about like the woman of his dreams, and then she keeps passing by, and oh, there she is again, and it's like groan-inducing. And I suppose his unlikability kind of continues throughout the film in some regards. Like he's super arrogant, and he's an egomaniac, like just hijacking an English class. Like, anyway, as we don't need to, but it is a drama, so you do actually have to question the character and stuff like that. If it's Dumb and Dumber, then it's like literally do whatever you want, say whatever you want. If it's funny, then I don't care. You mentioned Adam Sandler, Ben Stiller. To me, this is absolutely not that. Like, this to me it's a drama. But yeah, I don't know. There was something missing from this that I actually, you know what? As I'm sort of talking it out now, I'm becoming more and more like convinced that it's a script issue rather than an acting issue. But with all that said, I thought the film was fine. I thought the film was worth watching. I thought the film, I'm glad to have seen it. Like, I don't really count my initial watch of it as having seen it. It's when I started getting into movies as a teenager, I basically just watched every famous film that I could get my hands on. And, you know, there's many examples, including this one, of like, yeah, this wouldn't, if I saw it as an adult, I'd feel differently about it. Or, you know, maybe I'd like it more, maybe I'd like it less. But I don't really trust it or even remember, in many cases, my first encounter with it. But I'm glad to have revisited it. And, you know, obviously a huge fan of both Barry Levinson and Robin Williams. So I'm kind of happy to have updated my knowledge of it. But yeah, it's definitely not one that I'll be like speaking too highly of as like a classic. And I think, you know, it's kind of like, you know, when you see like Messi play like a game of football and he plays really solidly and really well, but he doesn't do anything like YouTube clip worthy magic highlight reel type stuff. He just does a really, really solid game of football. You're sort of like, oh, well, Messi was awful today. Like if I hadn't ever seen Robin Williams before, and hadn't seen the ecstatic heights that he can get to, then maybe I would look at this and go like, Jesus, this guy, I want to see a million movies of this guy. He was amazing. Anyway, glad to have checked it out. Trying to think if there's any other bits and bobs along the way. Nothing else coming to mind. But yeah, you know, middle of the road, 3-star movie for me.
Hey man, yeah, a few things that you said about Good Morning Vietnam. Well, first of all, actually, I'm absolutely fucked because I spent the whole last night dreaming that I was being chased by a big, massive alien worm that was trying to do what the face huggers do in Alien. So I'll try and be as coherent as possible, but for all intents and purposes, I had a very stressful fucking night's sleep. But yeah, I liked what you said in terms of, even if we don't necessarily like the comedy in the movie, we feel Robin Williams' character, what he means to people and what his radio show means. So we don't have to find the comedy funny in order to feel the fact that this is something that's very important to the people. And I feel like what Robin Williams manages to nail is Robin Williams' ability to connect with people is what's shining through here. And I think even though we've both questioned aspects of the movie, and like you said, it's much more of a script problem than a Robin Williams problem, what he does manage to nail very well is that we feel that he connects with almost everyone in the movie really well, and that is the thing we all love about Robin Williams. Now, the scenes in the studio, in the radio station, were all ad-libbed, and I didn't have a problem with any of those scenes, actually. Some of those scenes I quite enjoyed when he's doing the characters of the fashion designer, what to wear in the jungle, and the Wicked Witch of the East, and come here, stop me on, and all those various things. Thought those scenes were amusing. It was everything outside of that at times that I found was really bad. So I think you can actually make a distinction between the Robin Williams ad-libbing that worked and the script that he had to say at times, which in 2024 just doesn't work the same way it did then. So yeah, there is that. And he did mention that, I don't know if I'm misquoting you, you said you're a little bit disappointed that he wasn't the finished article by this time. Well, I just did a quick look there, and this is actually before Dead Poets Society. I don't know why I got it in my head that it was after. So Mork and Mindy, well, actually, he started off on Happy Days, didn't he? The character Mork and Mindy. Maybe it was just Mork. And then, so he finished Mork and Mindy in 1982, and this was 1987. So that's only 5 years. So he, it's on reflection, it does take a while for someone to make the transition between sitcom and to find the right tone. So the fact is, it's 5 years after Mork and Mindy ended, then we can certainly cut him a lot more flack, and considering a lot more slack, should I say. And the sleep is mashing up my brain. But the fact that the year after this we get Dead Poets Society, which is an absolutely fantastic performance. So he did learn a lot in this movie, I guess, and learns the way in which to get the most out of his talents and his persona. And he also mentioned, which is a very good point as well, I thought, that because this is 1965, this is before, at least to my limited knowledge, before the conflict escalated, so it's very much on the cusp of what's to come, and the context of that isn't really explained because it was a lot more fresh in the mind of the public at the time. That's true, and there is a kind of waiting around feel to this movie in the same way as something like Jarhead almost, where people know something's coming or suspecting something will come, but there's a lot of downtime. And the fact that his radio station entertains him, in fact, it does call into question, is the censoring a good thing at this point in the war then, if they don't want things to escalate? Is the censoring a good thing because they don't want shit to kick off? Obviously, it ultimately proves to be wrong and ultimately proves to be futile. But based on the information that they know at the time, is Robin Williams' character actually wrong to broadcast these things that will incite a situation, maybe? I don't know. I always come down on the side that censorship is wrong, personally, but does add another extra layer to it. But yes. Oh yeah, one other thing. If you're talking about the guy in the radio booth who played Dan the Man Leviton, who was the boring radio guy, if he looks familiar, it's because the actor's name is Richard Portnow, and apparently Barry Levinson uses him quite a lot in his movies. He always makes a point of giving him something to do. So you might just notice him from other Barry Levinson movies.
No, I was talking about the more wilder guy who remember the first time that Williams ever gets on the mic, like literally the very first time we see him on the mic. He is taking over from someone, not taking over, but like he's the show after one of the other guys. It's difficult for me to describe him, but he just always, to me, whenever I see him, I think he looks wild and loose and shaggy, and yeah, he's definitely someone that I've seen pop up in films of that era, but I can't even name one of them because I'm not quite sure what I've seen him in. I think Dan the Man then follows Williams. So yeah, this guy is a guy that just loves, I mean, I guess they all love Williams from the get-go, but particularly this guy. He's kind of like, when Williams kicks into his very first spiel, he's in the next booth over, like past the soundproof glass, laughing away. Just sort of thinking about it. Was there anything else you said there? No, I think we kind of covered it. It's in that kind of, there's a whole bunch of movies. Like there's a film, I think it's called The Painted Bird, which is a phenomenal film from a few years ago, that's set during wartime, but is not soldiers in combat. But it is set in a war. It's not just during wartime. It's like in the midst of a war, but it's not really like, it is a war movie, but it's not a combat movie. And there's many examples of that. And this is another one, I suppose. It's kind of an interesting genre. I mean, if you want to get super pedantic, it's not a war, it's a police military action or some whatever. But clearly, like, you would think of this movie associated with the Vietnam War. And yeah, we see them out sort of hiding from the Viet Cong briefly at one point, but for the most part, like, it's a movie about civilian life. Technically, yes, they are army men, but, they're running a radio station. So I kind of like that, not to necessarily speak about this movie specifically, but it's a bit of a subgenre. I mean, it's hard to call it a subgenre because the movies within it are so diverse and kind of nothing like each other, but it's a type of film I like often to see other stuff going down in the midst of war. Like, for example, Inglourious Basterds, all of the cinema stuff and all that, like, it's not, in the trenches or whatever. It's just doing stuff within a war. Maybe that's not the best example because they're literally trying to do like an espionage plot or whatever. It's more interesting to me when it's like, what is actual like day-to-day life kind of like within a war? Like, I think A Very Long Engagement would fit this, although it's been a long time since I've seen this. In fact, if I sat down, I'm sure I could come up with like a pretty good list, but I can't off the top of my head. But when we had the pandemic there a few years ago, there was a thing of like, we're doing normal stuff, we're buying groceries, we're working, we're watching TV shows, we're having relationships, we're, living life, but there's a sort of surreal filter on top of everything that restricts us and motivates us in different ways, and can be completely invisible almost at times. Like, you can be just sort of up to your normal thing, but then all of a sudden just like wham, hits you like the actual reality of the bigger picture situation you're in. And I kind of like that, movies that are set within that, because it just keeps you on your toes a little bit. Anyways, that's a complete tangent and probably representative of the fact that we've talked all we can about this film, I think. I would recommend it, as I said, but interesting to hear that he hadn't even done Dead Poets. I mean, I'm at that point, I don't even know what he would have done, It's quite a could be. I know he was already a TV star, but this could be kind of like in the way that Bruce Willis was a TV star going into Die Hard. Maybe this was like the real jump to cinema star making turn. And then if you come out with this and Dead Poets in 2 years, then you're kind of, that's your ticket to the big time.
Yeah, just to name the actor you're talking about, I think it's Robert Wuhl, who was in Bill Durham, and he's in one of the Batman movies of Tim Burton. And funnily enough, just saw there he's in the People's Joker as himself. So that's quite interesting. The other final thing I'll say as well is that the screenwriter of this movie, Mitch Marowitz, I think is his name, he wrote the TV sitcom MASH, which is set during the Korean War, I think. And a lot of that would have been in between the times of war that isn't happening. Like, I doubt there's any war shown on that show. I've seen it sporadically as a kid. And it's always just them hanging around the bases. So setting this just before anything kicks off in Vietnam would have been very much in his wheelhouse. That's probably another reason why it seamlessly ties into that genre so well that you and the movies you're talking about, because it's got the screenwriter of MASH.
That's interesting. I mean, MASH is almost the other property that you'd most associate with Good Morning Vietnam. I haven't seen much of MASH. What I have seen I didn't like, but I'd have to kind of have to give it another look. But it might be a case of MASH and Good Morning Vietnam both being things where the comedy doesn't work for me.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.